We can never forget what happened 21 years ago. But we can never forget what happened 2,000 years ago when Jesus died on the cross. And our message this morning is not just for you, it is also for me. Jesus, our peace. John 16, 27, 28, and 33. Will you read those verses, Carrie? Jesus, our peace. And the preacher I was listening to on the way here this morning was the same thing, talking about the peace that Jesus Christ provides. Without that, could we make it through each day? I'm totally serious. Could we make it through each day without the peace that passes all understanding? Would you read our verses for us, Carrie?
For the Father himself loveth you, because he hath loved me, and hath believed that I came out from God, and came forth from the Father, and I am come into the world again. Or again I leave the world, and go to the Father. These things I have spoken unto you, that in me ye might have peace. In the world ye shall have tribulation, but be of good cheer, I have overcome the world.
Long-term consequences. We don't understand and know what's going on. A little boy was sitting on the couch reading a book. And his mom said, "Johnny, it's time to come for supper." He said, "Oh, Mom," he said, "I only got a few more pages left." And he said, "Looks like the villain is getting ready to kill off the hero. Can I not finish my book?" She said, "No, it's supper time." So a minute later he came in the kitchen. He said, "You know what?" He said, "I didn't have time." He said, "Flip to the last page." He said, "Boy, that villain's in trouble. He doesn't realize that the hero's going to kill him off. He's going to really be surprised." Of course, characters in the book, they aren't going to know any difference. Larry told me, got a short joke for you, something Jim would say. Two guys went in to apply for a job, and they said, "What do you do?" One guy said, "I cut wood." The other guy said, "I'm a pilot." And the guy looked at him and said, "Well, we could use somebody to cut wood, but I don't know if we could use a pilot." And he said, "Well, if my brother doesn't cut it, I can't pilot." Does that make sense? Like I said, one of the marks of spiritual maturity is the ability to judge matters, long-term consequences, and rather than what we see, we want immediate rewards. We go to a restaurant, you've talked about this before, we want our food now. We want our food now. Where the restaurant said, the menu said, "Remember, good food takes time." Because I never worked at a fast food restaurant. Steakhouse was the most, you could say fast food, I guess. IHOP, I don't know if you consider that fast food. A lot of that's cooked and things. But we want our things fast. We want immediate results. We want to call the doctor, and when he answers, we want him to tell us what's wrong with us and fix it. We want it right now. Jim went to the doctor one time. The doctor said, "What's the matter?" He said, "You tell me, you're the doctor." You know Jim. But we want things right now, but we can't always have that. Well, in the middle of this, we have to have peace. It's easy to misinterpret things that are said or done, or we'll make up scenarios in our head what could happen. Jesus is our peace. But I sent Larry Joyce's pictures the other day. There's brush, limbs all around our house. I said, "Did it storm at your house?" And they said, "No, it didn't even rain at Kroger." So Joyce gets home and she calls and said, "What happened?" There's limbs everywhere. I said, "Well, didn't it storm at your house?" She said, "Well, what happened?" I said, "Randy cut him down." She said, "You pulled my leg." And it did. We don't have it all cleaned up yet. There's been some branches hanging over the house. You know, we got a tree cutter, and it's taken us several years to get the limbs cut off there. My wife said, "Worry about that." Well, Monday, Labor Day, we were sitting there, and a branch, it wasn't huge, it was about that big around. We heard this crack, and it fell, and Becky ducked, and it hit the roof right behind her. If it would have came down and hit her head, it would have shattered the branch. No, it would have done some damage. I mean, wasn't huge, but if you've ever been hit by a branch that big, it would do some damage. It hurt. Well, so Randy was going, there's a lady down the street, he's going to trim her trees the other day, and he said, "I'm going to stop by," and he said, "I'll trim yours." Well, he trimmed, and he kept going, and kept going, and kept going. Now we have nothing that's close to the house. That I know the Lord can take a branch and put it in the house, but most of the dangerous stuff is away from our house. And I'll have less leaves this fall to take care of because we're dragging them all back in the woods. So that night I was so tired, we were watching a movie we taped, and usually on the weekends we try to stay up a little later, so we sleep a little later, because usually we wake up at 2:30, 3 o'clock for the days anyway. So 10 o'clock I go back, I said, I am beat, I'm going to bed. I just can't stay up any longer. So I went to bed, she came to bed a few minutes later. 1:30 I was wide awake. And I didn't want to get up because I did that the other day and woke her up. So I laid there wide awake from 1:30 to 5. But during that time, the Lord, I already had the message done, but the Lord gave me all these things in my mind. But to relate peace also, as we have to have peace with each other, and we love each other and care for each other, the Lord started putting things in my mind. It's been a long time ago, and I asked my wife too. Carrie, you remember we hadn't been here long ago when the girls came over to our apartment?
Yes.
Did you guys spend the night, or did you just come over for the evening? Do you remember? We're too old to remember.
I don't remember, but I think we spent the night.
That's what I thought. What I wanted to say is, there was a storm that night. I don't know if you remember that. It was one of those storms where the thunder was shaking the house, lightning all over the place. I mean, it just didn't stop. And every time let out a lot of them, I don't remember how many girls we had, 8 or 10 girls, the girls screamed. Well, in their minds, maybe they were wishing, I wish we were home with my parents. But I was thinking, I hope that that time they had peace enough that they're with adults. Well, they're with one adult. Thank you. I was there, but they were with one adult. Maybe. But I thought of that situation where you have to have peace. You all have called over the years, all called preachers, say, pray for us. Sylvia and I, she's not here, but we've spent a lot of hours over the years talking on the phone with her Lyme disease. When Brittany was first born, she had a lot of medical problems. Of course, Sylvia was married, got married, and then that didn't work out. Steve's a nice guy, it just didn't work out with them. But we've spent a lot of hours on the phone over the years, talking. And I've called her Shorty. She's called me Tiny for years and years. My father-in-law used to call her Trinket. But we've done a lot of talking over the years, just all kinds of things, the medical things and all kinds of stuff. And I trust that gave her peace, talking, doing things. Over the years, Mike and I have done things for each other. When we first moved in our house, I heard some rattle under the house, and I went down there, and the water line, they had put the water line down and laid it down on top of a block, on top of the footer. So I was young and stupid. Now I'm old and don't even finish that story. So I decided I could break this piece of rock away from this water line and this hammer, and I won't bother the water line. Jim, what does a hammer and PVC have to do if they hit it? Water shoots out everywhere. I called Mike, and he was over there in 10 minutes to help me get in there and fix it. There was other things over the years Mike has helped me with, and now it's turned, and I'm able to go help Mike when he needs help. The point is that we all do things for each other, and the peace that Jesus has, the world doesn't know. I'm serious. And they can't have the relationships that we have as Christians. And now, like Mike said, I need the peace to know that you guys are praying for my family. So I said this message isn't just for you, it's for me too. But spiritual discernment is the ability to distinguish the permanent from the temporary, the seen from the unseen. Christ, of course, he contrasted the opinion of the unbelievers of the world with the opinion with his. He gave that to disciples, showing them that the world's opinion isn't always the best. I think it was Roberts on the Supreme Court the other day. He issued a statement. He said, they're still getting all kinds of flack over this Roe versus Wade. He said, we can't base our laws on public opinion. Because in many cases, and in our world today, public opinion's all warped. Public opinion says there's, 27 genders. Public opinion says that abortion is okay. Public opinion says that a guy and a girl can live together and have sex together and not have to be married. Public opinion says you can do what you want to do, you can have your fun because it's your life and you won't affect anybody. Public opinion says I can go out and drink and I won't affect anybody. Larry will tell you back there what alcohol, how it affects people. Not just his family, which it has. His daughter and grandson were killed by a drunk driver in the middle of the day. But thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands, how many can I go, in our country alone have been killed or maimed by drunk drivers. So public opinion doesn't always work. So when they have the public opinion, they think that they have peace. But we need the peace that passes all understanding. Not just a little bit of peace. So the first thing is the world's joy is short-lived. And you know this, but official religion hated Jesus Christ. He exposed their ignorance. You want to write these verses down. We're not going to read all of them, but if you want to write them down in the back of your bulletin, Matthew chapter 21, verses 23 to 27, and then Matthew 22, verses 41 to 46. We won't read all those, but he exposed their ignorance. But the most thing that they didn't like is he exposed their sin. What about the lady, remember when they were going to stone the woman for adultery? And it was legal. In that day and time, it was legal that the men could gather around and stone a woman for adultery. Now, I don't know whatever happened to the men. You know, if you commit adultery, it takes two, from what I understand, unless I'm missing something. A man had to be involved with that woman too, so he was just as guilty. But it was okay because the law said that this woman could be stoned because she committed adultery. And you know the story, all these men are standing around. And around here you understand because of all the limestone, and we have riprap around our flower gardens and lime flower gardens, and you've got pieces of riprap that are pretty heavy. If you hit somebody with a piece of riprap in the head, they're probably not going to make it. I was 4 or 5, and my dad said, if somebody does something, you do it back. This girl next door, we had from what I remember, one of those fences with the squares in it, and it was about this high, wasn't super high. But she threw a brick in my yard. I threw it back, and her head was in the way. She was okay. Boy, did I get in trouble, though. I was only doing, I said, you told me to fight back. But not with bricks, but this riprap, these rocks. They can do a lot of damage. So I'm not picturing, in my mind, I'm not picturing marbles. I'm picturing stones that these guys could hold in their hands. And here comes Jesus. Now, we still don't know what he wrote. He saw the situation, he stooped down, and I'm not going to stoop down because it'll be hard to get back up. When you get old, it's hard. It's easy to get down, but it's harder to get back up. Is that right, Dale? Mike, is that right? Troy, your time's coming. So Jesus wrote in the sand. We know that he said, he who hath no sin, go ahead and throw the first stone. If you're here, I don't know how many guys were there, 20, 30, 10, 5, 150, who knows? The Bible does not say, but he said, the one who has no sin, if you're perfect, you have the right, because you have no sin, you can cast the first stone. We said it all the time, when you point your finger at somebody, how many pointing back at you? 3 of them. There's not a person in this entire room, there's not a person, I don't know who else downstairs. I trust my wife, Peggy. I always come early. There's not a perfect person. There's not a person in this room, I don't care how old you are, how young you are, that hasn't sinned. Then we still do it all the time. So he said, if you've got no sin, go ahead and throw the first stone. Now, I can imagine, it says the men dispersed, but I can imagine these stones dropping on the ground. Clink, 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 clink. Now, maybe they didn't make much noise because it said Jesus wrote in the sand. But you would have heard them if they're big enough to hold. And these guys started going their way. Now, they probably walked away. I imagine they walked away. Jesus, he ruined the whole thing. He told us he's telling us about our sin. We don't like him. They probably walked away grumbling. We would. Am I right? We're humans. Well, they didn't like their sin pointed out. So they weren't happy with Jesus. Today, people in our world don't like their sin pointed out. He called them whited sepulchres. Looking good on the outside, but on the inside, they were rotten. And that's what happens with us. The song said, my heart was deep with sin until the Savior came in. We can look really good on the outside. We can have plastic surgery. We can have facelifts. We can put on a mask. We can put on makeup. We can put on jewelry to look good. We can put on hair. You can cover up a bald head. There's all kinds of things we can do to change our appearance to look good. We can fake it at church. We can fake it during the week. We can act with our co-workers. We can act like everything's fine, but deep down we're hurting. We can make everything look good, but inside, it's that inside part. When you got saved, it was the inside Jesus cleaned first. And then you clean up the outside. He exposed the sins of their hearts. And that's the problem, what's inside. Look at the next slide. He told them that they were careful about things that didn't matter. But they were tolerant of sins. Boy, and you know what? That's over 2,000 years ago. And that is our world today. Our world has things so upside down, it is pathetic. What should be sin, what should be denounced, it's okay. It's okay. Homosexuality, it's okay. Guys dress up like girls, it's okay. Tell Mike this, a lot of people are boycotting Disney. You're not allowed to say he or she. Any employees at Disney are not allowed to say he or she anymore because they're afraid you'll offend somebody. You can be a princess if you're a guy. I don't want some guy hugging my granddaughter. Think about it. Thinking it's a girl. Our world's all messed up. We need peace. Look at this next slide. The world saw the death of Christ as good news. But they were blinded to the bad news. Now Satan makes everything that's bad look good. The alcohol commercials. You always see pretty girls and handsome guys. They're always having a good time on the alcohol commercials. They portray the fact that, oh, you can do this and it's no problem. Like I said, Larry can give you all the facts. He's spoken thousands of times, literally, to hundreds of thousands of people about driving drunk. Because they don't show you the other side of it. They don't show you the back end of it. They make their product look good. Of course, everybody's going to make their product look good. Christ was dead, but he wouldn't stay dead. They didn't know the rest of the story like Paul Harvey used to tell. This is Paul Harvey, and that's the rest of the story. They weren't told about the end. They were told that Jesus, yeah, he died. But boy, wait 3 days. In the end, they will meet him again. Only at that time, he's not going to be a human being and God. He's going to be the judge. It's a lot different standing in front of a judge. I had an aunt who was a judge. Well, I still have the aunt, but she was a judge. Butch's sister. And he went up there a couple times, Ohio, and went to where she worked, spent the day. But Butch said, I said, did you go in the courtroom and sit? And he said, there's no way. He said, because I know my sister. He said Aunt Judy would have looked at the bailiff and said, see that man right there? Arrest him. And she would have had the bailiff go over and act like she was going to. So Butch said, there's no way I know my sister. Because if Butch was around, if his other situation the other way around, Butch would have done the same thing to his sister. So he wouldn't go in the courtroom. But when you go in front of a judge, there's fear because they could do anything. Your life, your fate is in their hands. I mean, I've heard judgments of this guy a few years ago, his third time stealing stuff here in Bloomington. He went down to the, I think the third time was the store right down here on Henderson and Winslow, whatever it's called now. He went in there and stole a fountain drink. And it was a third offense, and they put him in jail for like a year. I understand stealing is wrong. I'm not advocating it. If it's not yours, we were told we're kids, if it's not yours, keep your grubby bits off. But they put him in jail for a year, and then they turned around and some guy killed a woman and got 2 years in jail. Now, to me, that's not fair. But another judge could have let the first guy go with the pop, and he could have given the other guy that killed the lady 20 years. We're not here. So maybe somebody actually downstairs. People who are laughing should be crying because Jesus is coming back. Revelation 11, if you want to write these verses down, we're not going to read them now, but Revelation 11 verses 7 through 10. The devil's surprise. We talked about it before, but here's Satan back in the back, and Jesus is being hung on the cross, and he dies, and they take his body down, and they put him in a borrowed tomb, and the devil's standing back there, and he's got that Cheshire smile, cat smile, and he's wringing his hands. And he said, boy, now the world's mine. Because he didn't know. He was the devil. He had no idea what was going to happen. Now Jesus is gone. There's going to be a big party now. And Jesus is gone. The world's mine. I'm going to have a good time now. And imagine his face when 3 days later his minions came to him. He said, boss, leave me alone. I'm partying. Boss, don't bother me. I'm having a good time. Boss, we got to tell you something. You're not going to like it. Jesus is alive. Could you imagine the devil's face? You've seen people with surprised looks on their face. You get caught doing something you're not supposed to do, a kid, or you as a kid, or whoever, and boy, your face is surprised. He was dead, but he's alive. What a surprise. The party is over. And Jesus comes out of the grave and God is glorified. You want peace? There's no other world religion. Like I said, I don't consider Christianity a religion. It's a way of life. Religions have rules. There's no major religion in the world. All these false religions, there's not one where the leader is alive. They're all dead. Unless it's somebody just started something, but their leader, they're all dead. Muhammad's in the grave. Confucius is in the grave. They're all in the grave. Christ told his disciples not to be deceived by the world's perception of various events. The world's being deceived right now by their perception of what's happening. I've said it before, we'll probably say it many times. The world is seeing things happen, and we know why. It's all right here. How many are looking for Jesus to come back? Amen. Would you be upset if he came back today? Before you got to the buffet? Would you be upset? Boy, if we're going to have a 7-year buffet when we get to heaven. If he came back, hey, boy, what a joy that would be. What a joy that would be. And look at this next slide, a couple more slides. Believers have short-lived sorrow. There are a lot of things that we don't understand. We were praying for Mike. In January, it's going to be 2 years, Mike. On Sonny's birthday, 2 years. Wow. Sylvia has had this Lyme disease for years, had diabetes type 1 for years. 55 years. I wasn't going to give away her age. She wouldn't care. She wouldn't care. The only thing she could do is kick me in the kneecap, sign word. Linda's had this stuff for years. Mike's been a caretaker for Linda and Doris. You all get the picture. Sorrow comes quick. But they say don't borrow sorrow from tomorrow. And we could sit and worry about all kinds of things and fret, but Jesus said, trust me. So for the Christian, sorrow is short-lived. They believe that the earthly kingdom, predicted by the Old Testament saints, prophets, would be established by Jesus. But when Christ didn't establish that kingdom on earth, they were surprised. And then all of a sudden, he dies, and down the tubes goes all their hopes. There goes all their hopes and dreams. Well, now they're gone. Ryan has ventured out into all kinds of several other ways to make money because this company, they pay him good. He works for this company out in Australia. He does IT for them. All he does is answer emails. They pay him well. But he's diversified himself out some too because there's two guys that own this company in Australia, and if something happens to one of them and the company's gone, he could lose his income instantly. It could be gone totally. You know, if it was 100% of his money, he'd go from making good money one day, and when you got a family of 4 kids and 2 adults, it's not cheap. He could go from having a good job one day to get a notice, you're done. So he's tried to diversify. But you know what? The world didn't do that. They didn't think about all the things that could have happened. They didn't sit down and think about all the pros and cons. Have you ever done that? You're deciding on something and you take a piece of paper and you write the pros on one side and the cons on the other. Do I marry this guy or not? Do I buy this car or not? Do we buy this house or this house? Do we, whatever it is. We make this list and we look at the pros and the cons. What if I do this? What if I don't? Now, God usually puts people together that complement each other. If 2 people are put together that have the exact same personality, Connie, what happens? Dynamite! So God complements. When you seek God's will, many times He complements couples. One sees things one way, one sees things the other way, but you put it together and you look at everything. My wife is one of those that she looks at all the details. And I got a cousin in Florida that I told you she's been on a couple of grand juries and they didn't like her. Because my cousin Norma Jean, she looks at every detail. Yeah, but there was a crack in that wall right there, and that little bitty crack, we got a question. Norma Jean looks at everything in detail. She asks all these questions that I would have never thought about asking. And she works for the government. She is the person who assigns special teams. If they're going to send a special SEAL team to somewhere, she has to go in this vault that's guarded by a security guard, and only so many people are in there, and she has to go get the paperwork out, look at everything, and she's the one that assigns these people. Because she's critical of everything. She looks at every detail. And she's a perfect person to do that. Some people couldn't do that, and they couldn't do it correctly. So their eyes were open to the truth when Jesus came back out of the grave. Did they listen? No, that's the question. What about their attitude? When God does something for us, does He still answer prayer? Of course He does. I'm asking the Lord for a miracle for my sister. I've seen God perform miracles before. I told you last week about one. I've seen others in St. Louis. I was a new Christian. We were praying for a lady that had brain cancer. She was going in the next day for surgery. That day, I think it was a Thursday, I may be wrong, that's been a lot of years ago. They did a scan to look at everything again. Yep, everything's there. We're going in to do surgery the next morning. The next morning, she went to the hospital and they did another scan, and there was no cancer. It was gone. The day before, the picture showed that it was there. Did God answer prayer? Yeah. Now, we may not have something that's that critical that he answers, but does he answer small prayers? There's little things we pray about. I've had people tell me, well, I don't need to pray about my sore toe. God cares about your sore toe. I'm serious. You belong to him. Your children, they got one little owie on their knee. You still care about it. Now, Dad says, suck it up, get outside and play. You'll be fine. Mom picks him up, puts him on the counter, cleans it off, gets a Superman Band-Aid, puts it on the owie, kisses it. And it's a tiny thing. Our kids did it, our grandkids have done it. Something so tiny you can't even see it, but it hurts. But you give it a little attention, they're okay. They go and they don't pay any more attention to it. God cares about those little things. He'll put a Band-Aid on it. He'll help you. He wants us to have peace. The last slide here. The crucifixion of Christ was the greatest crime that was ever committed, and yet it was the one event, no, you see it up there, which brings the believer the greatest joy and blessing. Now, if you weren't a Christian, if you didn't know the story, and somebody came and told you Jesus died, had to die for your sins, you'd think, that's terrible. That somebody had to die for me. But then when you say, okay, Lord Jesus, I believe you died for me. I want you to come into my heart. I want you to save me. I want you to cleanse me. I want you to wash away my sins. I want your blood, your red blood, to go into my black heart, make it white as snow, and I want you to use me. There is no greater joy. There is no greater peace. Think about it. Think back when you asked Jesus to come into your heart. Was it a relief when you said, Lord Jesus, forgive me of my sins? I'm serious. Was it a relief? This burden of sin. I told you, I couldn't wait to get up. Our church had 3 sections. Big section, middle, church about 300. And about 5 rows back, 5, 6, and 7 rows with the teenagers sat all together. That Sunday before, the bus driver's son said, are you saved? I said, no, but I'm going to get saved next week. I couldn't wait. Some people say they know what, they wrote down the message that the preacher's preaching, the verses, and they knew exactly. I have no idea what Brother Cummings was preaching that day. I get to heaven, maybe I'll ask him, but it won't matter. I'll be in heaven. But I couldn't wait. I couldn't wait. 1, 2, 3, 5 rows back. Melody and Alyssa just said. Brother Stone, the youth leader, stand up there. Stand here waiting, greeting people. I couldn't wait to get down the aisle so I could get saved. He took me to the pastor's office, right up. Same thing here, up a couple steps, we're right there. Same thing. A little farther away because the church is a little wider, but you get the picture. And I knelt there and I asked Jesus to come into my heart. But I couldn't wait all week. I could have got saved. I prayed a prayer on that Thursday night watching the Billy Graham crusade. I may have gotten saved, probably did get saved on that Thursday night. When I prayed that prayer, I was probably saved Thursday night. But for my all intents and purposes, I didn't know. I was ignorant, even though I had gone to church. I couldn't wait. And Brother Stone prayed the prayer with me, put my name in it, that if Richard shall ask forgiveness, and Richard shall be forgiven. And a burden left me. I knew I was a sinner. I had been told I was a sinner. I couldn't wait to get saved. That was on my mind. That was the only thing on my mind. And then I started witnessing to people. Yeah, friends at school that hung around with at lunchtime, I started witnessing to them, inviting them to church, and they went somewhere else. Some of them went somewhere else for lunch. They didn't want to sit with me. That was fine. I still had friends, had other Christian friends, had friends. Carried my Bible to school, read it. I wasn't ashamed of it. They said, hey, Christian. Doesn't bother me. Still doesn't. If they don't like seeing me pray in the restaurant, they don't have to look. But it's a blessing when we see somebody, we see a family sit down, they bow their heads and they pray. That's a blessing to me. To know there's other Christians that care enough, that serve the Lord enough, that give their life enough, that they're willing to not be ashamed and pray in public. And usually when there's a bunch of us, if there's some of us at a restaurant, guess who they usually ask to pray? The preacher. Your pastor doesn't have a real low voice. Some people talk real little, you can't hear them. But your pastor doesn't have a real low voice. You know that. I don't care if people hear it. Maybe somebody gets saved over it. But in our peace, we need each other. I need Connie to pray for my family. I need Mike to pray for my family. I need Ann to pray for my family. You need us to pray for you. We have to have this peace that passes no understanding because this world's crazy. So let's stand with heads bowed and eyes closed. I just want us, as far as I know, everybody in this room here is a Christian. We got a visitor today, wife's here. Everybody here is a Christian. Let's just thank the Lord for the peace that we have. Now, I'm not going to stand here and tell you every day is going to be perfect. Father, as a body of believers, as a corporate body of believers, we're thanking you for the peace that you give us. The message, Jesus, our peace. We need that every day in this world that is topsy-turvy, upside down, wobbling all over the place. We need something that's constant, and we have it in our Savior. So I'm sure other people are praying too, Lord, but I want to say on behalf of all of us, thank you for giving us a peace that passes all understanding, getting us through each day, getting us through each week, getting us through the hard times and the good times. Thank you for loving us. As we talked about your Son pointing out people's sin. Well, thank you, Lord, that you've forgiven ours. That burden's been lifted. Bless our days as we go into our Sunday school hour. May you teach us through your word. And we're going to ask you, Lord, as you always do, place somebody in our path that we can be a testimony to because people need the Lord. And all God's people said.